Hey everyone, and welcome to the Rare Liquid podcast. Today I'm speaking with Paige, who was a Princeton undergrad, and as a bit of a fun fact, the artistic director at the Princeton University Ballet. She's also a fellow Wharton MBA classmate, and before she worked at SpaceX, she worked a few various roles at Qualtrics, and then worked in the enterprise sales and go-to-market strategy department and division at SpaceX, which is going to be the main focus of today's interview. And I think SpaceX is a company that's super publicly kind of well-known, but it's not really clear how and what it's like working at the actual company. So I just thought that this would be a super interesting interview. We're going to go over SpaceX's culture, what Elon Musk's presence is kind of like at the firm, what day-to-day responsibilities are like, and etc. So I hope you enjoy this interview. Now, before we get started, if you're watching this video via YouTube or watching this video on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, then you're going to notice this background's a bit different because I'm filming in Los Angeles instead of my apartment in Philadelphia, which is where I actually filmed the interview. So just wanted to give you a heads up about that. And then second, if you're watching this because you may also be interested in getting an MBA, you may have to take the GMAT exam if you don't take the GRE. And I wanted to let you guys know about today's sponsor for this episode, Target Test Prep, which I credit a lot for helping me get a 750 on the GMAT. Target Test Prep has been helping students crush the GMAT for 16 years and covers quant, verbal, and data insights for the new GMAT focus, with 52 rigorous chapters broken into over 1,500 lessons, over 4,000 realistic GMAT problems, over 1,300 instructor-led videos, 1,200 digital flashcards for studying on the go, and live online support from GMAT focus experts. Target Test Prep is also the only company on GMAT Club with a perfect 5-star rating, and they also have the highest score improvement guarantee of 130 points. You're able to personalize your study plan and practice tests for whatever works best for you. And so if you're interested, be sure to use my code RareLiquid15 to get 15% off, and I'll leave information about everything I just discussed in this episode's description. So Paige, thanks so much for making the time for this discussion. And I wanted to first ask you if you could give us an overview of your background.
Sure. Thanks for having me. So I'm Paige. I'm from the Bay Area originally, born and raised in a suburb outside of San Francisco. Went to Princeton for my undergrad. I majored in history with a minor in dance. So I was super involved in the dance community on campus, but decided I wanted to go into tech post-grad, especially a company that was in hypergrowth. So I started my career off at Qualtrics. I was there for 5 years in a number of different roles before coming to Wharton. And then as I was transitioning from Qualtrics to business school, I decided I wanted to work for a deep tech company, which brought me to SpaceX, where I interned over the summer and then also during the school year.
Awesome. And I wanted to ask about this minor in dance. What does that mean at Princeton?
Yeah. So even though it was a minor, I would say it was definitely a huge focus for me at Princeton. I probably danced like 25, 30 hours a week during school.
Wow.
And I was a really intense like ballerina growing up. So I did a lot of training in middle school and high school, and just decided I wanted to pursue that passion and continue to dance in college. So I ran a dance company called Princeton University Ballet. I was the artistic director, and then also was involved in the dance program and a few other dance clubs on campus.
This is totally random, but have you watched Black Swan, the video or the movie?
Yes, it's probably my least favorite dance movie.
Yeah, because I was going to ask if it's like accurate at all or if not.
It's definitely, there are like glimpses of truth in it, but it's definitely like super exaggerated. I also don't do well with like psychological thrillers. So
I see.
Not my favorite movie.
And this ballet company that you started, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Were you creating like shows that your classmates or people from around the area could come to, or what was that experience like? Yeah,
so we primarily performed for the Princeton student body, and we also put on productions for the community as well. And these were really like high quality productions. So we had to audition to be a part of the dance company. We had about 40 dancers, and all of them had pretty similar backgrounds to myself in that we were growing up always training, dancing like 30 hours a week, and had that really intense ballet training that we all kind of shared that passion and wanted to continue it in college.
Got it. And so then was this, because you call it a company, not a Or is that a ballet term? Because it's not like a club, right? Was it like a business kind of, or was it?
It was a business, and there
Okay.
was an aspect of actually like getting experience running a business as the artistic director, because I was, doing fundraising as well, like fundraising funds for the company and like figuring out the operations and the scheduling and when we were going to do performances and like directing 40 dancers. So it is kind of a ballet term to call it a company versus a club.
I see. Also, it sounds like a ton of work.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. Yes.
Yeah. And also, I wanted to ask about your time at Princeton. I mean, you decided to study in history. Why did you decide to major in history?
Yeah. I had always loved reading growing up. It was actually, so I dropped out of high school at one point, my junior year, to study at a pre-professional ballet program.
Oh, wow.
And so I basically just self-taught myself all of the subjects that year. And as a part of that, I found that the best way to learn was just to read books and read as much as possible. And a history major in undergrad is an intense amount of not just reading, but like analyzing the text and really synthesizing it and drawing out the insights from it. So I thought that, majoring in history was a really interesting intellectual exercise and just reading about so many topics and then like drawing out insight and contributing your own insight to that as well.
So it sounds like, were you trying to go and become a professional ballerina? Is that why you had dropped out and all?
Partially, yes. So when I was training in high school, part of the reasons why I decided to drop out of high school and join this pre-professional program was I wanted to experience what life would be like as a dancer, as a professional dancer. So I would do schoolwork from like 9 to noon and then dance from noon until 8 p.m., 6 days a week.
Wow.
And so that is really like replicating the experience of being a professional dancer. But at the end of that year, I decided I actually wanted to apply to colleges and, go the college route instead. So.
And what was the reason for that?
The life of a professional dancer is very, very difficult. Your career is really short. You can probably only dance professionally until you're about, 30, 35 years old. And it's very grueling on the body too. Like you don't want to see my feet at the end of the day. Like I would have to ice my feet in ice buckets like every day. Like my body just physically was in pain a lot. So it takes a toll on your body.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I could never really imagine, I couldn't never really empathize because I didn't really like ever dance. But I feel like if I just imagine how often you're on your toes and all of that, I feel like it would be really tough. But you decided to come to Princeton, and I think, so I actually was an English double major at Berkeley until I realized it was way too much reading. And then, so I settled for like a minor in creative writing, but I feel like the small number of English classes I took were so, for me, it broadened my perspective so much, and it balanced out like my business kind of side of my brain, I guess. And then at Princeton, for your history classes, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, a lot of people want to know what it's like studying at Princeton, like one of the top universities in the world, if not the top undergrad. I mean, when you were there, did you have just like an amazing experience, or were there also like a lot of ups and downs? And how was it like studying history at Princeton?
Yeah, I would say there were ups and downs especially in adjusting to the academic rigor of Princeton, and just the pressure as well when you're there. Everyone that gets into Princeton, they were, the valedictorian, the best of the best at their high schools. But then once you get there, everyone is the best of the best. So there is a lot of pressure to get good grades, to succeed, to get good jobs. But with that said, I still loved my experience there. I felt like I was constantly inspired and learning by just the incredible people that were my classmates. So it really did broaden my horizons. It taught me how to think analytically and really critically. And it just pushed me. I mean, it is very intense academic environment. Like I was probably, reading 500 pages a week. And,
Dang.
you know, yeah.
Business school must be like nothing then.
Yeah. People here complain about like long readings. I'm like, you have no idea.
Yeah.
But I think just the rigor of the academic environment really just pushed me to excel.
One last question about Princeton, because in comparison, as a context, you know, at MBA we have these crazy experiences, like we have Columbia Trek and we have Fight Night and all these events. Like, is there any one or two events or like kind of insider information at Princeton, unique aspects about the school that most people just don't know about?
I think Princeton, what really surprised me was, you know, there's not a lot of excitement around athletics at Princeton, as you would find at other like Big Ten schools. So people don't really like, you know, go to tailgates and get excited about athletic events, to be honest. But people get really excited about dance performances, which was great for me as a dancer. So that really surprised me, like just the enthusiasm that the student body had, and going to the dance shows and cheering. Like, I was used to an environment where it was like dead silence during performances. But students would go and pregame and like get really rowdy and just like cheer on the dancers. So that was like really interesting.
Oh, interesting. Fun. And you decided to, as you mentioned, go into tech. What made you make that decision? Because as a history major, I guess you could have done a number of different things. You could have gone into academia, et cetera. Why did you decide to kind of enter into the workforce?
Yeah, I think I had been drawn to tech for a long period of time. I think it started in high school, growing up in the Bay Area. I was kind of surrounded by tech. You know, some of my mentors growing up worked in the tech industry, so that was kind of in the background. And then also, ironically, through pageants was kind of that also instilled an interest in tech. So I competed late high school. I competed in the Miss California program, which is a feeder into Miss America. And as a part of that pageant system, you have to have a community service platform. And so I was trying to think through, you know, what is my platform going to be? I'm pretty good at math and science. Maybe I'll do women in STEM. So I actually went around to different high schools in the Bay Area and started talking to students about, you know, famous women in technology and the sciences. That's actually how I met Elon Musk in high school, which is another fun story.
Interesting.
But I think those experiences kind of in high school leading up to college really influenced and kind of planted the seed for my interest in the tech industry.
Okay. And we're going to talk about SpaceX, but please tell us how did you meet Elon Musk in high school?
Yeah, kind of a crazy story. So, you know, I was preparing to compete at Miss California, and I had an interview coach who at the time worked for a major tech publication reporting on tech news. And she knew my community service platform of Women in STEM, and she invited me to the Silicon Valley Visionary Awards. This was in 2012. So she invited me to the award ceremony. She was like, I have an extra press badge. Do you want to come? I was like, sure. So I dressed up in a suit to look older. I pretended to be a reporter, like literally wearing a press badge. And Elon Musk was he was one of the 3 awardees. And so I was kind of like searching the door, like looking for him to arrive. And then when he got there, I just kind of bolted towards him and introduced myself.
I can't remember if this is correct, but if I do remember, it was Tesla founded in like 2008 or so.
Yeah, and before SpaceX.
Okay. So then at that point, things hadn't really exploded that much, right? So he wasn't the Elon Musk today or even from a few years ago. Was there a lot of hype around him at that time, even then? Yeah,
I still remember there was a lot of hype around him. This was still kind of the early days of SpaceX. So I actually remember what I said to him. I said, congratulations on your recent successful mission to the ISS. So this was like a big point in SpaceX history where they had just launched what's called their Dragon capsule. And it had docked with the ISS. So this was like a huge deal in the industry. So that was kind of like on the rise of SpaceX and Elon's fame.
Gotcha. And Hopefully one day he watches this and he'll be like, oh, I remember that girl I met. No.
I'm sure he doesn't remember me, but I remember that moment.
Cool. And we'll go more into SpaceX and all of that in a bit, but I wanted to ask about your time at Qualtrics as well. What made you want to work there? Can you kind of walk us through what kind of work you were doing there for around 4 or 5 years, right?
Sure. Yes. So when I was a senior in college, I was researching companies, and I kind of had the idea that I wanted to work for an earlier stage tech company that was experiencing a lot of growth. I thought that would be a really interesting place to start my career. And there were actually quite a few Princeton alumni there at the time. So, and they came to campus and did some on-campus recruiting. So that was how I got introduced to them. And for those who aren't as familiar with Qualtrics, you probably have taken Qualtrics surveys.
Yeah.
But there's a whole backside to Qualtrics, which is more of a data analytics and reporting tool that a lot of businesses and Fortune 500 companies use. So I was kind of researching what are some good entry-level roles in tech, which is a bit hard to find if you're a non-engineer. Because most tech companies do a lot of like engineering recruitment, but less so on the business side.
And what were your roles throughout the years?
Yeah, so when I started, I joined the customer success department. This is a pretty common role at enterprise software companies. So essentially, you manage a portfolio of accounts, and you kind of the primary metrics of what you own are customer retention, product adoption, and expansion. So for me, it was a really good entry-level position to work with a lot of customers in a lot of different industries and really go deep on understanding their business models, the challenges they faced, and then also get to know the product really well. I thought I became a much more technical person in that role, just truly understanding how the software product works. And then the third piece of it was the expansion and the sales. It was a world-class education in how to sell at an enterprise software company or enterprise technology company.
And did you stay in that for across the time you were there, or?
No, so I kind of grew up in that role. And at first I was managing tons of accounts, and then my portfolio of customers got smaller and smaller and became larger and larger corporations like Amazon, for example. I worked with Urban Outfitters. So I kind of started to have more prestigious accounts. And then after 3 years, I moved into more of an internal strategy role. So I was a senior growth manager for our largest product line.
And what was, it seems like, or I would imagine the headcount like kind of might have exploded. What was it when you joined, and what was it when you left?
So when I joined, there were about 900 employees. When I left, I think there were 6,000. So definitely significant growth.
Was there a lot of turbulence that you faced from all of that growth? Because I would imagine there are like new departments or divisions kind of forming, like restructuring all the time. And you kind of joined not at like a seed stage startup place or headcount, but kind of like, I don't know what they were at the time. Were they series like?
I think they're series E actually.
Oh, E,
so
okay,
pretty late stage. But yeah, there was a lot of turbulence and a lot of, they call it growing pains of just witnessing and being a part of an organization where, as you grow and scale so quickly, there are so many challenges that, you don't have roles for yet. You don't have people in seats to like figure out those challenges. So I kind of enjoyed that, because one of the perks of joining a company that's scaling rapidly is there's always going to be exciting new opportunities as the company grows. So for example, I started off in their Salt Lake City office in Utah, but a couple years later, they were opening an office in Seattle, and they asked me to go and help, start and lead that team. So it's kind of a cool opportunity that came along.
And were there, I would imagine there might have been a lot of ambiguity. Like, were you okay with that? Or was that maybe one of the challenging parts? Did you embrace it, or was it more of a challenge?
I embraced it. I really liked the ambiguity. I think as you grow with the company, the scope becomes smaller and narrower. So I think that, like, if you work at Google, for example, it's a massive company and your scope is probably going to be very narrow.
Yeah.
That didn't necessarily attract me. I like to have a larger scope because I feel like you can learn a lot more and you're exposed to a lot more challenges.
And when you were working at Qualtrics, maybe especially like early on, did you, and maybe even today, did you feel like your history background came into play at all? Or did you find that, oh, a lot of what I learned is I would imagine gives you some perspective, but doesn't give you like the technical skills? Like, how do you look back on how what you studied in college kind of helped you in some way in the workplace?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a big jump to go from history at Princeton to working in the tech world. But I think fundamentally that education at Princeton, studying history, taught me how to really think critically and deeply. So not just understand things at a surface level, but to go deeper, to do a lot of research, to really understand like what is at the core of this problem I'm trying to solve. So is that like analytical and critical thinking that I gained the most.
Got it. And so now kind of, I guess, transitioning from Qualtrics to SpaceX. So, or I guess SpaceX you first interned at during last summer in 2023. So can you tell us, I guess, first of all, like what got you interested in the firm? Was it meeting Elon, like 10, 12 years ago now? Or were you always interested in space? Can you walk us through that process, your thought process of wanting to recruit for SpaceX?
Sure. So I wasn't one of those like space nerds that was always interested in, dying to work in aerospace. I think my interest, it was a little more recent. So as I was applying to business school and kind of like wrapping up my time at Qualtrics, I had a sense that I wanted to work for a deep tech company. And what I mean by deep tech is these are the companies that are solving the world's biggest problems through scientific and engineering innovation. So you can think of the spaces like climate tech or aerospace or defense, manufacturing, AI. I really wanted to dive more into these sectors because I think that there's more fulfillment versus working on like a consumer or like another enterprise B2B SaaS product. So that was an initial thought. And then my partner actually worked at SpaceX for 7 years. So I had some exposure to the company culture and I had a few friends there. And I was very inspired and intrigued by the intensity of the culture at SpaceX. I think that was something I was also looking for. I think that a lot of tech companies, especially during COVID, the working environment was very lax. There were a lot of people there that didn't necessarily live to work, but work to live, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I was in my next step in my career, I really wanted a place where I could be surrounded by extremely passionate, intense, driven people.
Yeah, I actually read the past, or I don't know if it's the past two, but the 2 Elon Musk biographies. And so I kind of, from that perspective, kind of got a sense of what the company culture might be like at SpaceX. And I guess before we dive into SpaceX too much, sticking on the recruiting process, I mean, what was that like? Can you kind of walk us through the, I guess, number of interviews, what kind of questions were asked and how you prepared?
Sure. So there wasn't a standardized recruiting path when I was applying to SpaceX. There definitely is for the engineering side of the business, but not so much on the business side. They don't generally recruit MBAs. I was one of 3 MBA interns. So for me, I took a more proactive approach. I actually had my friend refer me to a hiring manager that was hiring for her team. And I think that was really important in just getting my foot in the door, was having a really strong referral that was very specific in saying, Paige is a badass. Here are the things that she can contribute. Not literally, but like just kind of the gist of the email was very positive, vouching for my abilities along with some specific skills that I bring to the table. So from there, the interview process, I had, I want to say, about 3 interviews. The first one was with the director, who was the hiring manager for the team. And it was mostly behavioral, just asking questions about my background, some ideas I had, kind of what skill sets I would bring to the table.
And what do you feel like those skill sets were? Like, how did you verbalize them?
Sure. So, and this involved some team and company research to actually understand, okay, what are the challenges that they were facing? And initially, the project that I was kind of interviewing for, or the team, was focused on international growth of Starlink. So when Starlink enters new markets, how are they going to track and actually have metrics around, are they successful in that market entry? And that was kind of something that I had gotten very used to and good at Qualtrics. We were a very metrics-driven company. So in my previous roles, I had done a lot of, analysis and tracking around, are we hitting the right metrics? What should those metrics be? And so that was something that I kind of leaned on in my interviews and something that I told them I could bring to the table.
And were there any questions you remember that might have thrown you off guard a little bit or were really challenging?
So there was one question I got. This was actually in my second interview. So halfway through, I switched teams to the enterprise sales team. And I remember them asking me, what makes you exceptional? And that kind of threw me off because I had never gotten that question in an interview before.
Yeah.
But I think that speaks to the nature of SpaceX and the people that they tried to hire. And what they really look for is identifying like what makes you an exceptional person, engineer, like business person, and kind of trying to assess like what sort of impact will you bring to the org.
Yeah, maybe I should start asking people this. What did you say? Yeah, what did you say?
Yeah, I don't know if I gave the best answer, but I tried to, I think, tell a story around, growing up as a dancer, a super like competitive, intensely trained ballet dancer. I think I bring that training, that mentality to the workplace. And I really push myself. I'm not a complacent person. And I push myself to, demand the best work of myself, but also my team and the organization. So I kind of tried to like paint that picture based off of
that makes a lot of sense. And where I can actually just from this, I don't know how long it's been, like 20 minutes, feel this strong drive that you have. Where do you feel like that comes from?
Yeah, I think so. One of the things I really value as a part of my character and others' characters is resilience. This reminds me of this quote, this speech that went viral a few weeks ago with Jensen, the CEO of NVIDIA. And he is like talking to a bunch of Stanford students and he tells them like, I want you to experience pain and suffering. And that you should have low expectations. And I would modify that statement to say you should have high standards for yourself, set high standards, but have low expectations. And I think that's the perfect blend of humility, but competence. And so that's kind of what I've always tried to optimize for in my life is, whatever I'm doing, like have low expectations, but try and be highly competent. And I think that gives you a lot of resilience.
I think that's super well said. And I think it sounds like you could be a great like career coach if you ever wanted to be. But I wanted to also ask next about, so you recruited for SpaceX. Like, how did it feel to get that offer? Because it's, like you said, one of three MBA students get an internship there. What was that like?
Yeah, I was super excited. This was something that I had thought about for a long time, with my partner working at SpaceX and having a couple friends there. They had tried to convince me to apply to SpaceX for a long time. And it kind of took me a while to get to that point where I felt like I was ready and I knew what I could contribute. But once I got that offer, I knew, and I was still interviewing with other companies at the time, but I kind of knew in the back of my head, like, yep, I'm going here.
And once you started in the summer, was it like you're drinking from a fire hose, you're given all these things? Because I know some of the more established industries, like let's call it like banking or consulting, they do also give interns a lot of work, but then at the same time, they know that it's like once you come full-time is when you'll really take over the projects. At SpaceX, I don't know, were things a little bit like that, or did they give you like work and like, hey, like we don't have capacity, you got to do this? Or what was it like?
Yeah, it was definitely like drinking from the fire hose. There's really no onboarding or training. They just throw you into the water and it's kind of a sink or swim situation. So I would say like on my second day, I think is when they gave me my initial project. And from there, I just spent the first few weeks like trying to get up to speed and learn as quickly as rapidly as possible. So I would get in early, stay late, just do so much research and learning and trying to like really understand the problem. So much so I kind of became obsessed with it. Like I would go home at night and work and do research and just like, I would listen to podcasts on the topic on my way to work. So I think the first few weeks was definitely pretty intense.
And can you help explain what role you were, what role and responsibilities you had?
Sure. So when I first started, I was working for a team called Direct to Sell, which is a new product that Starlink is launching later this year. Essentially what it is if you have a premium phone plan, like with T-Mobile, for example, and you go out into the wilderness where there are dead spots, your phone will be able to connect to Starlink actually immediately. So it won't require those user terminals, those dishes that you've probably seen on people's houses. Your cell phone will just connect directly to Starlink internet. So it's a very novel technology. It's extremely exciting. So they've signed partnerships with telcos around the world to launch this service.
So it's for primarily dead spots, or is it anywhere basically in the world? Like instead of using T-Mobile, can I just use this service? Or
so it won't compete directly with telcos. You'll still have to have your cellular plan. It's more so an extension of it. And this is true of Starlink in general. It's really meant for remote areas without internet connectivity.
Okay. And so if I wanted to access it, would I add it on through my T-Mobile plan, or is it a separate thing I sign up with like on Starlink?
Yeah, so you will access it through your cell phone plan. So like with T-Mobile, for example, I think they have like their premium tier. It would be included in that premium tier,
Got it.
could add it on.
Okay. Hopefully I have T-Mobile. Hopefully like that works for me.
Nice.
And what about your responsibilities? So can you walk us through what, I'm sure every day was different, but maybe first starting off broadly, what were your responsibilities?
Yes. Yeah. So my internship was more project-based. So they had assigned me a specific, business challenge to work on. And for the summer, that was thinking, so I just described this direct to sell business. My challenge specifically was thinking about this service for the IoT space. So IoT is Internet of Things. You could think of that as like your Google Home device, your Apple Watch. But in the industrial space, it's drones, it's sensors, it's machinery. So there's, millions of IoT devices that are out there in the world without access to internet. So this will solve for that by providing satellite internet to those IoT devices. So long story short, I was working on this project to really figure out what was the business model going to be for that sector. How are we going to price it? Were there competitors? How are we going to package it? I was doing a lot of user research as well, talking to prospective customers and beta customers and trying to understand how to best position this service to them.
And you kind of touched a little bit on what you did for day-to-day, like customer interviews maybe and things like that. But you also talked about how like you would get in early, leave late, kind of do additional research. But can you walk us through what a day in the life kind of looked like?
Sure. So for that particular project, I would, get into the office around 8 a.m. And usually I would do a couple hours of research. Like when you're launching a new product like this, you're building everything from scratch. It's almost like being a CEO of a startup because you really have to deeply understand what does the market look like? What do the potential customers look like? So it was a lot of market analysis of just painting a picture of what does this market look like? What does the pricing look like? How do we want to price in comparison to other cellular service providers? So it was a lot of research, a lot of talking to engineers. This was probably the most challenging part because it's such a technical system and it's very extremely innovative. No one's done this before. This is novel technology. So it was a lot of talking to engineers and whiteboarding and just figuring out like, how does this even work? Which was definitely like very intellectually stimulating. So I felt that I was actually using a lot of my like business school education and thinking about how do we create competitive advantage? How do we price? How do we like set up a business model that has attractive margins?
And on the topic of like applying what you learned from school, during this project, what was like a key learning that you took away? I'm sure there was a ton, but yeah.
Yeah, I think the most interesting was probably thinking about the business model. I think in my previous roles, I had been very focused on, working with customers, increasing sales, driving revenue. But it was really interesting to think about like the business as a whole. How do we structure a business model in order to like create a competitive moat and create the most attractive margins? Like, I think it was truly like high level thinking about the entire business, not just like one narrow department or aspect of it. So that was really interesting.
If I'm understanding this correctly, it's you were for Starlink provides internet service primarily to dead spots, at least for this project, and then not only to customers' cell phones, but also to industrial applications and all these devices. And so you're trying to figure out how to basically find the companies that have a lot of dead spots. Is that what it would amount to? Like those would be your primary customers?
Yeah, and it's a huge customer base. If you think about it, half of the world doesn't have internet coverage. So there are millions of consumers and businesses that would greatly benefit from low latency internet access at an affordable price. So it really is a huge market.
So were you looking at customers all over the world then?
Yeah, super global. Starlink is an incredibly global business, which was one of the things I loved. Especially like working, I joined a second team in the fall, which was more focused on enterprise sales. So I was working with companies all over the world.
And where did you find that maybe after all this research that you've done, where were the countries and types of companies that were the best customers?
Yeah, I would say there was a huge market in the agriculture space. So Starlink actually just signed a huge contract with John Deere. And this was a space and industry vertical that I had worked on when I was there. But if you think about like huge farming operations in Latin America, for example, no internet access on the whole. So for a lot of these businesses, like it is truly, a game changer to be able to have internet access and bring your operations online.
And how did you guys think about the pricing? Like, were you guys doing a lot of surveys or were you guys more experimenting and trying to find that like perfect price point that maximizes on volume and price that gives the highest revenue? Like, what were you guys thinking for pricing?
Yeah, I would like to say there was like a very scientific and analytical approach to pricing. But it was a little bit like understanding what is the current market for pricing, both from like traditional satellite providers and from just regular cellular service providers, trying to understand like what does that range look like and where do we want to be. Obviously, we don't want to price as low as the cellular providers because that's basically a commodity market at this point. And also that's where a lot of the user research came in as well, like understanding what was the customer's willingness to pay for that service. So I did talk to a lot of beta customers and do a lot of research there.
Got it. And during your internship in particular, was there like a strong feedback culture? Like when I imagine these SpaceX, and you were kind of thrown into the water, as you say, I imagine there's like a lot that you have to do. You're drinking from the fire hose, and then it could be tough to always like get feedback when you have to work on one thing or another and everyone's busy. Or was there a good feedback culture at SpaceX?
Yeah, I would say they had a pretty solid feedback culture. They did have like quarterly review cycles, which is pretty standard, like in the tech world. So I did have that like mechanism for feedback. I would say other than that, like I did have to sort of ask my managers, how can you evaluate my performance? Like, how am I doing? So I think that's important as well. But I think if you're not doing well at SpaceX, like you'll know.
The feedback means you don't work there anymore.
Yeah, maybe. Exactly.
Yeah, okay. What kind of feedback were you given? Like in terms of like what feedback did you find very helpful?
Yeah, I think kind of to extrapolate the insight here, I think one of the things that was a challenge for me initially was communicating with and getting buy-in from a primarily engineering audience. So this is a really important aspect about SpaceX is they are an engineering-driven company. And this was very different from Qualtrics, which is much more of a sales-driven company. Like a lot of the leadership, the executive leaderships come from a business and sales background. And obviously here at Wharton, like everyone's very business-minded. So in some ways at SpaceX, it felt like I was almost speaking a different language. And it was pretty challenging to get buy-in on ideas or things that I felt were, important or the right, decision.
Hey guys, hope you're enjoying this video so far, and sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to let you guys know that I recently launched a how to get into MBA course called liquidMBA in case you're interested in breaking into a top MBA program. The course provides access for all aspects of the MBA application process, access to a library of admitted essays, of which there are 10 per school, and super detailed school-specific advice covering things like student life, academics, clubs, resources, leadership opportunities, essays, and even 30 secrets for each MBA program. We have a 24-hour free trial, so you can check out the course for free, and also a no-risk money-back guarantee if you don't get into at least one MBA program. We also provide lifetime access to our Discord community where you can connect with peers and get additional support from me and my team. Admissions consultants often charge $400 to $700 per hour, which is crazy to me. And so for the price of a 1-hour call with a consultant, you get everything I discussed and a whole lot more. So I really am trying to make liquidMBA a really good deal for you and a no-brainer. I've been spending a ton of time and energy pouring everything I possibly can into this course. I really think there's not going to be a better bang for your buck type resource if you're interested in an MBA program. And I'll leave a link to liquidMBA in this episode's description. You can check it out if you're interested. And you eventually actually started working part-time while still finishing out your second year here at Wharton, and you moved to a different team. Can you tell us what the team was like? Well, you told us what the team was, but why did you move to this team, I guess? And then can you walk us through what your responsibilities were while you were working there?
Sure. So one of the motivating factors was the team that I was working on over the summer, direct to sell, they were very, very early stage in the launch of this product. And so it felt, even though we were working a lot, it felt like we were moving somewhat slowly. Like the light at the end of the tunnel felt a very long ways away because it was so early stage. So I wanted to join a team that was bringing products to market like immediately. They were already, selling and operating basically. And I also wanted to pivot to a slightly different side of the business and get experience on the enterprise sales team. I'd always kind of been interested in the revenue side of the business. I had done some sales type of work at Qualtrics. So I really wanted to experience that at Starlink.
And so you had worked in these two different parts of SpaceX. So, and you kind of alluded to what the culture is like just based on like working hard and being so excited. But how would you describe the culture at SpaceX?
Yeah, I think one of the things that struck me pretty much immediately was the focus on the mission. Like on my first day and my first onboarding session ever, the head of HR walks in the door and she's like, SpaceX's mission is to make life multiplanetary. And everything is in service of that mission. Like Starlink is there to generate revenue that will provide the capital to build this next generation vehicle that will take us to Mars. So it's kind of like blown away by that a little bit.
Yeah.
But I do think that like that mission alignment and that focus really permeates the entire culture. And I think sustained focus over a long period of time is really a key currency for any business. And SpaceX just does this so well. Like everyone there is so focused on the things that will make it possible to achieve that mission and nothing else.
That's really interesting. And because also when you're working on, like when I think about what you just said of, we're trying to make sure that this business makes enough money for this larger goal that we have. Were you reminded about it so much kind of on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis that you really bought into like this multi-planetary mission? Or was that kind of like you would hear about it every, like, I don't know, month or so? Or like, I don't know, how much did it permeate your work where you felt like you could really buy into this mission and it was like on top of mind for you?
Yeah, I think it wasn't so much like a day-to-day reminder, but I think that there were specific practices that were put in place that were in the end service to this broader mission. So for example, SpaceX is an extremely scrappy company. They have the most efficient use of capital that I have ever seen. If you look at like their revenue compared to the amount of money that they've raised, it's phenomenal. So kind of a trickle down effect to that is they don't spend money. They like to build everything and they don't spend money on, fancy software tools or, a CRM system or, a bloated workforce. Like everyone there is there for a reason and they are at maximum capacity because it's a very lean workforce. So I think it's just things like that kind of keep everyone focused.
Yeah, I remember reading in the Elon biography when they were creating parts for the spaceships and things like that. People would come to Elon and say like, oh, this is going to cost like X amount. It's going to take this amount of time. And he said, why can't we just build it ourselves? And then he just literally creates new parts and makes it reduces cost by like sometimes 95% plus.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad that what is written there seems to be a lot of it seems to be true. Did you find that the culture, like it seems like you're driven, you're willing to work hard, and do people kind of seem to self-select into that kind of culture? And I guess what I'm also asking is kind of like what the work-life balance was like. Did you feel like I'm enjoying the work so much, the intellectual stimulation is so great that I don't mind putting in these extra hours, and that's the kind of people that fit in best? Or were there some positions it seemed where it had more and more of a quote unquote normal tech work-life balance?
Yeah, I think it is certainly a self-selecting culture. Like if you go onto Glassdoor, for example, and you look up SpaceX, like virtually all the reviews are, the work was really hard, the hours were long, but it was the best job of my life. So I think that is broadly true of the organization, is like the people who work there, they want to be there. They're passionate people who want to work hard. And I think, I don't think there are really that many roles that are kind of like a relaxed 9-to-5 jobs. I mean, there are certainly days where you're working less hard and days where you're working more hard. But on the whole, I don't think that like super lax jobs really exist. Like if you're looking for a company culture where there's like a bar and like a kombucha bar and like a tennis court and you're chilling from like 9 to 4 p.m., like that's not SpaceX.
Were there any perks though? Because tech companies are famous for their perks. Did SpaceX have any of?
Yeah, there were some perks. Like we did have cafeteria with subsidized food. That doesn't sound like that much of a perk, to be honest. But I would say it was like a more standard workplace. Like the office itself just kind of looks like any other corporate office. It doesn't really have the kind of like nice amenities that like a Google or a Meta or maybe an Amazon would have. But at the same time, like I went down to the Hawthorne office a fair amount and like you're working where they literally build the rockets. Like I went on the rocket factory tour and like the satellite tour, and it's just very inspiring to be in that space where they're actually building those things.
Right. And did you find anything from your time working at SpaceX, like anything surprising? It could be an unexpected challenge, or it could be a delightful surprise.
I think one thing that was surprising was people's willingness to help and responsiveness. Even like super busy engineers, they would respond. Like oftentimes when I would message them, they would respond right away. And even though people are, intensely working there, there's still an atmosphere of, we want to help you, we want to help you succeed. Like we want to kind of contribute and collaborate with each other. So I found it to be more collaborative than I expected.
And how about Elon's overall presence and impact? Obviously, he is like a huge influence into the company. From your perspective, like what was his influence in terms of how it affected your day-to-day? It could be things like, he sends like a company-wide email, or like he actually comes to the office and like you see him, or your coworkers tell you stories about things that have happened. Like what was his influence during your day-to-day?
Yeah, I would say there wasn't a huge Elon influence day-to-day. At this point, he's pretty removed from the day-to-day operations, but he does keep, a high level pulse on the company, and he'll come in and hold like all hands meetings when he feels like there needs to be more pressure added to the organization, or if he feels like something should be better than it currently is. So that did happen, and people definitely respond to that. Like he kind of just like presses his thumb when there needs to be more pressure.
Yeah.
But overall, like people don't really talk about like, oh, Elon tweeted this or he tweeted that. Like because there's so much focus at the company, people don't really care about, the controversial things he's saying on Twitter. They more so respect him and have a reverence towards him for, who he is as an entrepreneur and a CEO.
And were you, as you were working throughout school on all the different projects, like how were you able to, how were you able to kind of like first come across, or why did you decide to work part-time while still in school? I guess is my question.
Yeah, I think for me, I actually enjoy working. So after my first year of business school, I didn't work in my first year. And I kind of missed it, to be honest. Like I do really find a lot of fulfillment out of doing work that I enjoy, and that I'm learning something from. And I also felt that it would be good to have SpaceX on my resume for longer, to be honest. And that did end up being very helpful. So I just felt like at the end of my internship, like I wasn't quite done there. There were other teams that I wanted to experience, and I was learning a lot. So that kind of motivated my decision to stay.
And I know you worked at Armada, and so can you tell people what that company is and its relationship with SpaceX?
Sure. So Armada AI is a full stack edge computing platform. So to give a little context here, for industries that are pretty remote, like think of oil and gas, mining, defense, manufacturing, they're generating terabytes of data from drones, from sensors, from machinery. But a lot of this data is just sitting there, not really doing anything. So that's where Armada comes in. They are a hardware and software platform where they provide the edge compute, the actual compute power, and they provide the software via third-party and proprietary AI models. So it's a really interesting company, and where Starlink and SpaceX fits into that is they actually have a really unique partnership with SpaceX. If you think about, their customer base that they're trying to serve in very remote areas, they also require satellite internet connectivity. Like a lot of these oil rigs or mines don't have internet access. So it's kind of a natural fit for Starlink and Armada to partner together. Starlink for the connectivity, and then Armada for the compute power and the AI.
And I want to make sure I understand edge computing. I have the right understanding of it. Is it basically you might have like a primary, I guess, like computer or something where a lot of the information kind of flows, but then for some devices, they're kind of like outside of the network, like further away. And then edge computing is like computing done further away from like kind of the source, if that makes sense. Is that the right understanding of edge computing, or can you help explain?
Yeah, happy to explain. So edge computing is essentially bringing the compute power closer to the edge of the network where the actual devices are, where the data is being generated. So a lot of people are probably very familiar with cloud computing, right? You have AWS, you have Azure. With edge computing, a lot of these, very cutting edge AI use cases where you're trying to collect and use that data from, machines or sensors and actually run AI models in real time. If you're sending all of that data to the public cloud, that's going to be very expensive and it's going to be very slow, or too slow to actually, make what you're trying to do work. So edge computing is really powerful in that sense because it allows you to run the models on the edge and to, compute, to have that compute power close to where you're actually generating the data.
Got it. And so what Armada does is basically edge computing in a combination, and it helps gather all of the data from the different kind of industries and all these like, it seems more like industrial type companies, and then brings all of it and uses AI to offer what kind of solutions?
Yeah, so in the industrial space, it might be predictive maintenance, for example. So using this data on site, having this situational awareness in a mine, for example, so exactly, are there issues with your machinery that you can detect without having to send a person down into the mine? So it's all about using the data sources and AI to be able to, save on labor, for example, or be able to predict, is there going to be a breakdown in service somewhere? So it's really powerful.
Got it. And is it not just industrials? Is it also like across various other industries?
Yeah, it's definitely a B2B product. So we do sell to and service a lot of different customers, but I would say like the primary markets and industries are more industrial type, like manufacturing, even retail stores in remote locations, defense.
And did you say Armada was a partner to Starlink, or was it like a customer and then you joined? You know what I mean? Because I could see how Armada would use Starlink to get internet access to all these remote places that industrial companies don't have internet access to. Was it a customer of SpaceX, or was it a partner?
Yeah, it's more of a partnership because if you think about these companies, they may be looking for edge compute and AI services, and they may also be looking to purchase Starlink from SpaceX. So it's more of a joint selling motion in a partnership.
And can you kind of walk me through how you came across like this opportunity? I mean, were you aware of them because of your work at SpaceX, or did it come across your radar somehow? Yeah,
so it actually happened, I think, a couple days after I had left SpaceX. In December, Armada came out of stealth mode. And so it was all over my LinkedIn feed. And because they have this partnership with SpaceX, several people in my network were posting about it. And I was like, oh, this looks pretty interesting. So I started researching the company. And then my fiance knew one of their investors, and he basically had that investor introduce me to their CEO. And that's how I got connected to them.
It. Why did you, why did you not want to keep working at SpaceX, I guess? What made you want to pivot to something else?
Yeah, I think I had a sense that I was interested in working at an early stage startup for a while. Even when I was at SpaceX, I would have conversations with my managers about my career path. And they had mentioned on several occasions, like, you should look into joining a startup. I think you'd be a really good early stage operator. And then I would say my partner was also an influence too. He is a CEO and founder of a startup, a Series A startup. So I think that, watching him build and run his business over time kind of opened my eyes and opened my perspective to what it's like to build a company from the ground up And from what I saw, I thought it was really exciting.
And so your fiance does not work. So he moved on from SpaceX as well.
Yeah, he moved on from SpaceX a couple years ago to found a company.
Got it. And if you're for a lot of people who want to work in tech, which I think a lot of people come from all different walks of life, but particularly in your situation, you're working in industries that are very technical. You also worked with engineers, edge computing, AI, space. All of these are tough industries to ramp up on. Mm-hmm. What kind of resources do you usually use to ramp up on these industries quickly?
Yeah, I would say I'm a very curious person and I like to be constantly learning. I would say I usually rely on podcasts and books and Twitter. I feel like I don't post that much, but I think there's a lot to be learned if you follow the right people. So I would say those are my 3 primary channels of learning. In terms of, I do listen to a lot of podcasts. So I listen to the All In podcast, which is 4 really famous founders and investors, and they talk a lot about tech and tech trends and business. I listen to Lex Friedman. He interviews a lot of deeply technical people. There's a new podcast called, I think it's called BG Squared with Bill Gurley and Brad Gerstner. Again, Silicon Valley tech investors. So I would say that's probably my number one source of learning is just constantly trying to be in the loop in terms of information. And then also just talking to people and having conversations with engineers and not being afraid to ask the dumb questions. I think that helped me a lot at SpaceX, especially.
I think a lot of what our even our classmates, from what I've heard, especially when they're entering in new industries and they're ramping up, there can be some level of imposter syndrome. Do I fit in here? And am I fit for this role? And all those doubts, did you ever face those, or were you usually able to kind of block that kind of thinking out? Or if you did, then how did you kind of overcome imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I would say I definitely experienced imposter syndrome. It was kind of a frequent thing that happens. But I would say something that helped me, especially, when I was working at SpaceX, having a couple friends or mentors internally where, when I was really struggling with something, I would just call them up and just talk it through for 10, 15 minutes. I would say that was really helpful, just having kind of a supportive network of colleagues that I could lean on. And then, just kind of self-talk and over time telling yourself this is hard, this sucks in the moment, but I am learning a lot from this. And, I'm a couple months from now, I'm going to emerge a better, smarter person. And,
I mean, it's not good actually if you're always comfortable. So almost in a sense, if you don't have imposter syndrome or nerves or anxiety in some way, in a healthy dosage amount, I guess, then you're not really putting yourself in a situation to learn. Totally. And on the note of, having, you kind of talked about the people around you and at SpaceX. And I wanted to actually ask about the way teams are structured. Was it very, very, first of all, feel very flat? And then you said it seemed pretty lean. So in your team, how many people were there?
Yes. It is a very flat structure. There's not a lot of layers of management. And just to kind of give the lay of the land of Starlink, I'll kind of skip the engineering side of the business, but focusing on the business side, some of the core teams are, you have the enterprise sales team, which I was a part of, still a pretty small organization, about probably less than 20 people. And then you have the growth team, which is more focused on marketing, entering new international markets. Starlink at this point is in, I think, 70 plus countries. So they're constantly growing and entering markets. And then you have more of the business operations teams. So this would be supply chain people and people working on the gateway ground infrastructure. That's a really big team. And procurement, things like that fall more into operations.
And then I also wanted to ask if you're comfortable sharing what comp kind of looks like at SpaceX. Is there like salary and then bonus and then some level of equity, or like what is it? And it could be just a broad range as well. Like what does it look like when you're working full time in, I guess, like a business kind of role?
Yeah. So for the interns, to be candid, like the pay is pretty bad. It's definitely below market rate. Like I remember I had also gotten an offer from Amazon around the same time. And I think my Amazon offer was like 2.5x.
Wow.
So it was significant. But for full time, I would say the base pay is below market. I don't know how much below market. But a lot of my friends like definitely took a pay cut to come work at SpaceX. But the reason you join is not for the base comp, it's for the equity. So I believe most full-time employees do get stock options. And if you just look at the growth of SpaceX and the valuation over the last, 5-10 years, it's significant. So I think that's really like the driving force behind why people want to work at SpaceX. Apart from, the career opportunities, when we're talking like financially, it's really the value of the equity.
Got it. Sounds like you really gave up a lot in terms of, or maybe not a lot, but in terms of compensation. You stuck to like what you were truly interested in order to work at SpaceX, at least for the summer. And then now it seems like you're really following your passion, staying in tech, working at Armada. And so what I wanted to next ask about is kind of like about your MBA experience and how it kind of has like impacted you and helped you along this journey so far. So generally speaking, I guess to start off, what made you want to move from Qualtrics to getting your MBA?
Yeah, so I think about 4 years into Qualtrics, I was looking at kind of considering MBA programs, and I was definitely influenced by a lot of my colleagues and managers who had MBAs. I think that was pretty common at Qualtrics. They hired a lot of MBAs, and especially in my department. So I was definitely influenced by, my colleagues having gone through that experience and speaking very highly of it. And then just candidly, like after 2+ years of a pandemic, I was really looking for kind of a more stimulating environment where I could be in classes and, meet a bunch of new people and just have that kind of exciting experience, which business school really provides. And then the other piece of it too was I felt a little unsure about where I wanted to go with my career. I kind of had the sense that I wanted to stay in tech. But other than that, I was maybe a little unsure of what exactly I wanted for myself in my career. And I think business school has helped give me that clarity and really explore a lot of different, functions and career paths and stages of companies.
Yeah. And I think having come also from post-COVID to school, it's really like opposite ends of the spectrum. It's like zero stimulation from people all the way to like almost too many opportunities where you always have to choose.
Yeah.
And thinking about your MBA experience so far, we're about to wrap up our second year and graduate. Do you feel like there were any particular personal lessons that really stick with you and that you'll carry on into the future?
Yeah, I think that my perspective has just expanded so dramatically throughout these past 2 years. I think I really have become a more curious and honestly more passionate person since I've been here. I think like taking that time away from the constant grind of work where your focus is more narrow and just having that space to learn about different topics you're interested, like explore different career opportunities. I ran a conference in the fall, the Wharton Tech Conference, like having that opportunity to run and manage a team. And there's all these experiences that I had and people that I felt so inspired by that I truly think I've come out of this experience having just like learned a tremendous amount and expanded my perspective.
Wow. So that means last fall, were you working at SpaceX and running the conference?
I don't even want to tell you how much I did not sleep last semester.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It was crazy.
Because you said you were working like 20, 30 hours a week at SpaceX?
Yeah, I was probably averaging about 20, 25 hours working for SpaceX. And then I had a full course load. And then I was also running this conference.
Yeah, and conference planning is like no joke. There's so much to do. So props to you for getting through last semester then.
I wouldn't say it was a fun semester, but I learned a lot from it.
And you also did dance studio this semester, which dance studio, if you could also help explain that, what that is. And then also you auditioned for the Seattle Seahawks.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about those experiences too?
Sure. So starting with dance studio is a really popular Wharton tradition where once a year, every March, there's a big dance showcase with like 15 different pieces of, you have Bollywood and Bhangra and hip hop and contemporary. So I led one of those pieces. I was a choreographer. And it's really open to everyone. You don't need to have dance experience. So for a lot of MBAs, it's just a fun stretch experience to be able to perform on stage in front of all your classmates.
And it's also a lot of work too.
It is a ton of work, yeah. But that's like fun work and things that I enjoy doing, like choreographing and dancing and teaching people dance. And then on the Seahawks side, so another goal that I had this year was to audition for a professional NFL dance team. And this is something I had never done before. But it kind of brought me back to like my high school and college days where I was working super hard towards a goal and had, another passion outside of work. And it was kind of a crazy experience. Like I flew to Miami over spring break and was training for auditions and flying back and forth between Seattle and Philly, going to prep clinics, training and dancing in 2 hours in the morning before class.
Wow.
But it was a pretty cool experience. I actually made it to the finals. So flew out to Seattle a couple weeks ago and competed in the finals.
Wow. That's crazy that you're doing so much. And it may even almost seem like when you go to work, it'll seem easy because I don't know, like at work, you can work a lot of long hours, but I think what's hard about school is like context switching all the time and like traveling. Yeah. So it's almost, I feel like if I settle down into a city and don't have as many like temptations every weekend going somewhere, every like few weeks going on like an international trip, then I'll be able to like feel more settled and get more done in a routine.
Totally. Yeah.
What about any like favorite classes that you've taken at Wharton? Do any come to mind?
Yeah. Probably my favorite class is a course that's very popular at Wharton. It's called Scaling Operations with Professor Gad Alon. I actually took it in San Francisco as a part of the Wharton semester in San Francisco program. And a lot of the cases were very focused on high-tech companies in the Bay Area. So we actually had some founders from the cases that we studied in class like come and speak to our class. But the gist of the course is it's all about once you get past that 0 to 1 phase of a startup, how do you know, when and how to scale to one to many, right? So it was a really cool.
Yeah, super popular class here at Wharton.
Yeah, I think it's like one of the hardest classes to get into.
Yeah, I wish I actually took it in retrospect, but oh well, we can't anymore. And you kind of referenced 0 to 1, which is a very popular book by Peter Thiel. Were there any other books that you read about tech, business that you found very helpful?
Yeah, I think 2 come to mind. The first one is called Amp It Up by Frank Slootman. Probably not one of the most like well-known tech books, but I think it's an incredible book. Frank Slootman's the CEO of Snowflake, which is a really well-known tech company, very successful. But he talks a lot about how to create intensity and urgency in an organization and like build that culture of urgency. So I thought it was a really good book on like leadership and how to build culture. And then my second book, that's kind of like my Bible right now, is called The Qualified Sales Leader. It's by John McMahon. He's like a multi-time CRO. But it's all about how to sell and grow revenue for enterprise technology companies. So I think even if you're not interested in sales, you don't go into that. Like, I think it's still a super valuable skill set.
Got it. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna need to check it out. I'm trying to read more after the MBA. So
not a lot of time right now.
Yeah. So. But to wrap things up, kind of, we have some fun little questions for you. And the first one is, if in an alternate universe, if you were not working at Armada and working like take like, if you hadn't gone this track for tech, and I'm also going to take out ballerina because that's like seems like one that we already had discussed. What would the alternate universe, in an alternate universe, what would you be doing?
Yeah, I was gonna say ballerina. So now I have to think. I might be, I think maybe like if, let's say if comp didn't matter either, like nothing mattered. I would maybe say teacher. I think that's one thing that I've like really enjoyed, especially from the dance studio experience, is like learning that I actually really like teaching and mentoring people.
What kind of like elementary, high school, or professor, like academia route, or
maybe middle school. I feel like that would be an interesting age to teach.
Yeah, when everyone's going through puberty.
Yeah, or maybe a really terrible age to teach. But
what about a significant thing that you've changed your mind on over the past like 5 years or more?
Yeah, I would say my outlook on failure has really changed a lot, like since I've been in college. I think in high school and college, I was a huge perfectionist. And so every like moment of failure, I was very hard on myself. And I think probably a lot of like overachieving college students can relate to that. But I think that now I look at failure much more so as like eating your greens. Like it kind of sucks in the moment, but like this is really good for me and it's developing resilience. So I think, yeah, I've had a big mental mind shift change on failure.
That's a good one. And I also, it's so interesting what you said in the beginning of how you're a perfectionist, or you were, maybe still are, because I could just imagine for ballet as well, you trying to perfect everything and look very, very crisp.
Yeah.
So I feel like that could have also maybe translated to that you being hard on yourself for other things as well. And on the note of like failure being like greens, I guess there are also some veggies that taste better than others. So as best as you can, I think like you can't choose what failures you'll have because you'll always be trying to go for things. But yeah, I having gone through a failed business myself, I would also say that one of the best experiences that I've had, but very, very, very tough at the time.
Totally.
But now, just as you said, I really, really appreciate that time. So I think I might steal that one from you too. Nice. One more is, what is your most contrarian high conviction opinion?
I think my business school classmates are going to hate me for this, but I actually think networking in business school is overrated. And I caveat that by saying like, I did get a lot of my career opportunities through my network. But I think that a lot of business school students like justify things through, I'm networking, like I'm building my network. But I think I've actually thought about this a lot differently in my second year, where this year I've been really focused on like, what are the 5 to 10 close friends I want to have in my inner circle who I'm going to be friends with after this experience? And then who are the 20 to 30 people that I just find really interesting? Like, I think they're smart, cool people. They may somehow be relevant to my career in the future, and focusing more on that versus like trying to network with every single person and meet as many people as possible.
Yeah. And I think people seem to just have very different approaches on this. Yeah. I think some people I've talked to just want to meet as many people as they can, like you said. And then others, especially in your second year, I feel like do concentrate on like the closer number of friends that you've made in your first year that you really like vibe with. Last question I have for you though is, if you could go back to your younger self when you were 18, 20 years old and you were giving yourself advice, what would you say to your former younger Paige?
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid to think outside the box. I think that's actually helped me a lot in my career. Not a lot of MBA students were looking at like SpaceX, for example, for where they were going to do their MBA, or, Qualtrics for immediately after undergrad. But I think Peter Thiel has this famous quote where he says like, don't put yourself in a position where you're competing against everyone else. So I think it's good to like think outside of the box. What are the companies, what are the industries that are like very exciting that you think are going to be on a high growth trajectory? Because that's also kind of the key to set yourself up to get in somewhere early where you are going to experience a lot of that growth.
Well, I think it'll be very interesting to also see where you are in 5 to 10 years, because seems like you're going down a very exciting path working at very cool companies. So And I'll also be after this interview thinking about like my own drive, which is like one of the key takeaways from this chat with you is how much drive you have and how that portrays when we're speaking and all of that. But thanks so much for your time, providing all the insights that you did at SpaceX, Qualtrics, Princeton, Armada. And thanks so much, Paige.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, so that wraps up the interview with Paige. Hope you all enjoyed. And I personally feel like I've always was curious to know what it was like working at a company that Elon Musk has founded. And so I personally found this interview particularly insightful and hope you all did as well. That said, thank you all so much for listening and tuning in. Hope to catch you in the next episode. Thanks, guys, and peace out.